We're going to use ChatGPT to distinguish among the financial performance for Ford, General Motors, and Tesla. So specifically, the question we're going to ask is, how does financial performance compare for Ford, General Motors, and Tesla? And to do so, we need to use some data. So let's go ahead and download that data. And so let's go ahead and download the data, and that's got some specific information there for each of the three companies. So you can see for Ford, you can see 3 years worth of Ford performance, 4 years worth of performance for General Motors, and 4 years worth of performance for Tesla. And so you can kind of see that information is provided there. So now let's go ahead and recognize that the ones labeled after Ford, GM, and Tesla. So we're able to kind of see that. Let's go ahead and just interpret that a little bit and just tell ChatGPT something. Now maybe it was able to figure that out, but we're telling it specifically which ones are Ford and General Motors and Tesla. But you'll notice we looked, it's got the year up here, and we may want to change that category to year. So let's just kind of see how that goes, and we may need to come back and address that. So ChatGPT knows what the DuPont method is, disaggregation, and DuPont is essentially disaggregating between the profit margins, the return on sales, asset turnover, and the equity multiplier in order to compute or disaggregate return on equity. So as we apply analytics techniques, we're going to ask it specifically to calculate the DuPont ratios. But just to check, we're going to display the formulas used so that we can see, and we're telling it specifically do return on sales, asset turnover, equity multiplier, and return on equity. And as we go back and look through here, here's the component parts that are needed for each of those various calculations. And this is a way we're going to use it to perform that analysis. So let's go ahead and hit enter and ask it to perform. And what you'll sometimes see is ChatGPT continues to learn. And so it will say, okay, well, there's two possible ways to approach this. And it looks like this one is kind of leading the same way. So far the same. I like it to display the formulas used, so that's good. In the end, these are probably going to be synonymous, but it would be good to use that. This one's going to go a little bit further and say I'm not going to only display the formulas, but I'm also going to generate some line charts for ROS, which is return on sales, asset turnover, equity multiplier, and return on equity. And so we kind of pick which way we wanted to do that. You'll note that it kind of learned that it was 2021 to 2024. So it's learning that category is kind of working that out. It looks like it's proceeding on both dimensions, and I think they're roughly synonymous. I didn't see any major differences between the two. And you'll notice you perform this that you'll see how this is different now versus when I'm filming it versus when you do it some months or years later. And you'll see kind of, it's learning and growing and solving these issues. Now, these calculations might be a little bit slower because it is trying to do two at once. I didn't ask it to do that, but you kind of cede some of that control over to ChatGPT as you go. But what we're trying to do is disaggregate return on equity. You can see return on equity is return on sales times asset turnover times the equity multiplier. And so you can kind of see how these cross out with each other. Hopefully you've had some exposure to this, but if you see all these terms cross out, and the return on equity is just net income divided by stockholders' equity. And at that point, we're able to see all we're doing is disaggregating that. So let's kind of see what it's done so far. So here's Ford's revenue over the years, and here is the calculations for each of those for Ford and General Motors and Tesla on each of those dimensions. Sometimes hard to see on this screen, but You can see how these lines go. So here is one of the dimensions, which is return on sales. And so we're seeing in general Tesla has higher profit margins, though that has changed over time. We're also seeing a little bit unusual years here because it's just the various 2021, 2022. We don't have any other data points, but you can kind of see what that looks like there. All right, so we're kind of seeing a difference between these two. So that comes back on us and says, okay, do we really understand the calculation? What is the difference between return on sales trend and trend of return on sales? And the same here. You can see, now I can see that these were reversed. So this started with 2024 and went to 2021, and this started 2021 and 2024. Same thing here, so it's kind of the same graph, but multiplied. And so I encourage you to continue to be professionally skeptical. You got to look at these things and really understand it. You got to understand the underlying, what is asset turnover? Well, it's a measure of efficiency. What is equity multiplier? Well, it's actually the way that the company's capital structure, they have more debt or do they have more equity, and how are they structured? But then even seeing this, if you were to provide this to an investor, the standard is to go left to right, and meaning years as it continues over time. Now, at least they've called these two different things, but if you weren't familiar with that, that would be an issue. And so you can kind of see what these line charts look like. Now we've had a whole set of choices. So there's things I don't like about each, right? This one kind of went backwards and this one went forwards, but I don't like the half-year convention. It kind of messes me up. But I would probably still prefer this one. And so then it takes the other one away, and it is actually learning as it goes. It's actually done the analysis for me. I can ask it to interpret the results and tell me which one's preparing better, but what you'll see is some are better at some things than others. And you can kind of see how close actually return on equity is for all of them. So many think that Tesla was overperformer, but at least in return to shareholders or stockholders' equity, it looks roughly the same. So to finalize this lab and tell the story, we probably want to generate a visualization. And this time it's going to be the trend chart. We could have done any of them, but I asked for the final line chart, which is this one, and asked for it to be made into a PNG file. And so as it works on that, I'll also prepare my next one, which is simply asking it to display the prompts. If you've done a few of my other labs, you'll see that that is something that we can easily ask it to do. Sometimes it gets a little bit lazy, so you can see in this case it did ask us to download the file, but it didn't actually do it, and so I would have to run that one over again and kind of talk it into it. And finally I'm going to ask it to display the prompts, and it'll just provide those on the screen. So you'll notice yours is slightly different, and each time you run this will be slightly different. I will show you a little thing here, and it's kind of a way to regenerate. You could use a different model that might be more appropriate, or just simply a try again. So on this one where we didn't quite get this, let's just go ahead and try it, see what it does. Let's just go ahead and say, hey, try this one again, because it didn't actually output the PNG file. It said, hey, I'm going to do it, but then never quite did it. And that's one of the reasons I get nervous about providing a whole stack of instructions all at once, because sometimes it will just end up not doing it. So you see in this time it did do it, and so we can start the download and then go and get that file. So that completes this lab.